This is music, and this is a bunch of innovative albums. So, Stormwind 79, a great music-themed channel on YouTube. It's devoted to collecting and listening to music media. And he provides some really in-depth, thoughtful, insightful discussions of not just the music media, but also the music on the media. I strongly recommend checking it out if you don't already know it. I'm sure most people who watch this channel already know about Stormwind 79, but on the off chance you don't, go and check it out. He's recently reached 200 subs, and to celebrate that, he started a thread, and the theme is very simple. Show 5 to 10 or more, if you want, innovative albums that you think are so innovative that other people should check him out. And I want to certainly celebrate his 200 subs because I really like his channel. So here's my contribution. First of all, I just want to say that I decided to stay within the realm of metal music. Otherwise, my list would just be full of prog rock releases because they are almost per definition innovative. Also, it's not a ranked list. So it's just a bunch of innovative albums. I will just mention 5 honorable mentions first, sort of outside the world of metal. And the first one is Muse. Mew is the name of the band. And the Glass-Handed Kites, which is a really cool art rock album that manages to be both emotional and artistic at the same time. Then I want to mention Genesis, Calling All Stations. I'm sure not a lot of people saw that one coming, but here they came back with a new singer who had a completely different voice than Phil Collins had. And they also kind of went away from the pop direction they had sort of been going in the 80s and early 90s. And it's, I would say a great album. And part of the innovative aspect of it is that they sort of reinvented themselves. Sadly, it wasn't a great hit, but I like it. The next one is Yes, Fragile, a great prog rock release by a great prog rock band. And then I want to mention Tears for Fears, The Seeds of Love, which is a pop album, but I think Tears for Fears were a really innovative. I think they're still active, so I guess they are. But on that album, they were really innovative in terms of taking pop music in a more artistic and less brain-dead direction. Sadly, pop music ended up completely brain-dead. In the 80s, pop music was still, I think the pop song was still seen a bit as a work of art, but now it's just completely dumb and brainless. So it's good that we have The Seeds of Love to go back and listen to. And then, of course, I mean, if you want to talk about an innovative album, there's no way around the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band, which is innovative in so many different ways. Composition-wise, the use of studio technology, use of instruments and singing and album structure and everything. It's the epitome of an innovative album. Anyways, let's get to my metal list. I'm gonna start with the CDs. I've organized it by media and alphabetically, but it's not ranked. But let's start with the CDs. The first one I want to mention is Unquestionable Presence by Atheist, which is a blend of death metal and jazz. I could have actually added any of their albums, I think, because they do that on all their albums. Even A Piece of Time, although it's more death metal and less jazz. But here is where the jazz really comes in, and it's really well balanced, and there's some really great songs on here that are challenging to listen to. So, but Atheist, unquestionable presence, jazz meets death metal, which I think is per definition innovative. The next one is a traditional metal album here, Bratz 1980, that's the name of the album. And this is traditional metal, but they are in a transition from being a punk band to being a metal band. Eventually this was kind of the predecessor of Merciful Fate. So here you have some punk songs, you have some traditional metal songs, but what makes this innovative to me is that there are some songs here that have an almost like modern metal sound to it, like metal now. There's some riffs, some guitar parts, some melodies that have an almost, post 2000 metal sound to it. But it also sounds very 80s, and that's also kind of innovative because this is 1980, but it sounds like something that could be like in the early to mid 80s. Bratz 1980, great album. And the next one is Hard Work by Carcass. And I could also have listed any album by Carcass, certainly up until and including Swan Song, but I went with this one here because this is a pioneer album within melodic death metal, right? In a way, this was the invention of melodic death metal, at least one of the albums where it was invented. What's really cool about this is you have the melody, but you still have the grindcore part. You do have the blast beats. You do have the death metal as well, which they went into on the previous album, Necroticism. But Hard Work by Carcass, innovative because part of the invention of melodic death metal. Another album that mixed death metal and jazz is Cynic's Focus. And this one is strange. I mean, it's great. It clicked with me the first time I listened to it, but a lot of people find it strange because it has the I don't even know if it was actually recorded there, but it has the Morrisound death metal production. But the music is very complex, very progressive, with lots of jazz fusion elements. And then you have the vocals, which are a mix of death growls and then high-pitched vocoder singing, before all the rappers and pop stars started using similar technology, right? So this is a precursor of that. It sounds good on this one. All the contemporary rap with similar voice technology like autotuner sounds like shit, but this is a great album. This was so challenging to listen to that people didn't get it, and it flopped, and the band broke up for a long time. And of course they reformed, released a couple of great albums. Sadly, the drummer left over creative differences and then passed away, very unfortunately. The next one I want to mention is No Exit by Fate's Warning. And this one I think is innovative because prior to this, Fate's Warning was more like a very heavy traditional metal band that for each release became more and more progressive. And they had a great singer in John Arch, who's come back eventually, and he did a solo EP, and he's done some albums with Jim Matheos of Fate's Warning that are absolutely great. But on this album, this is where they went all out progressive, and they also have a new singer, Ray Alder. So it's all out progressive, but it's still very heavy. Some people have even described it as being on the border of thrash metal. I don't know if I would go that far, but it's still very heavy, very aggressive, but it has the odd time signatures. The drumming is a bit choppy. This was before Mark Zunder joined, but the drummer still does a good job. I don't remember his name, but No Exit by Fate's Warning. A great prog metal album. Up next is Dying to Live by Invocator. Invocator started out being a technical thrash metal band, very aggressive on their first album, Excursion Demise. Then they slowed down, became darker in their overall expression on Weave the Apocalypse, but still tech thrash. Here, they've transitioned into being a groove metal band, but a progressive groove metal band, and they draw on influences from a lot of different genres. They still use the metal and rock instrumentation, but you can certainly hear, like in the drumming, you can hear elements of Latin music. The riffs are really, really groovy and crushing for the most part. The songs are very complex in structure. You have Perle Hansen playing some excellent melodic leads. I mean, this is a great groove metal album. This, I would say, is proof that not all groove metal sucked. Because groove metal became kind of unpopular because all the bands sounded the same. Another progressive metal album, Promised Land by Queensryche. This is not my favorite Queensryche album, that's Empire. So Queensryche were probably the most accessible of the big four prog metal bands of the late 80s and early 90s, being Queensryche, Fates Warning, Dream Theater, and Psychotic Waltz. These guys were the most accessible and commercial sounding. On this album, though, they take their music in a more moody direction. It's not as upbeat. It's not as accessible. It's very dark. It's almost brooding, and there are like saxophones every now and then. So it's innovative because they sort of go away from what they sounded like prior to that. In a good way, because after that, Here and the Now Frontier came out, which was awful. They tried to sound grunge and sound, like 90s, and it just didn't work, and that took them like just downhill up until, I would say, they kicked out Jeff Tate and brought in Todd Latour, and now I think they're good again. But this is an underrated progressive metal gem, very dark, very different, very moody for a Queensryche album, and for a progressive metal album at the time. I know a lot of you despised this one, Rage Against the Machine, self-titled. This was a big hit in the 90s, and this is innovative, of course, because this is where rap and metal or rock were successfully married. Yes, you had I'm the Man by Anthrax, you had Bring the Noise, Anthrax, Public Enemy, you had Walk This Way. They were all fun and good songs, but this is where it came together seamlessly. This is very funky and very groovy and has some really, really angry, politically charged rapping. I could also have, and I actually wanted to, but I couldn't find it, included the first Clawfinger album, because it came out around the same time, maybe a couple of years after this, I don't remember. And that was also a very successful marriage of rap and metal, but their style was more kind of like industrial. So I guess that's kind of like a bonus mention. But here, Rage Against the Machine, self-titled. I love it. I know a lot of you guys hate it. I love it. And I think it's hard to argue against it being innovative for successfully marrying rap and metal / rock. Of course, that gave birth to nu metal, which... let's just move on. Up next is this one here, Maximum the Hormone album. The back cover, there you go. That's their shtick, right? Maximum the Hormone is a Japanese band, and their style kind of is half groove metal, half hardcore punk, but what characterizes them is they just completely mix genres together within metal, within punk, within rock, outside of punk, metal, and rock. There is, not on this one, but on one of their other albums, there's a metal track that, mixes groove metal and disco. this also has lots of different stylistic influences. And there's a song on this album, by the way, does collect a lot. I think they were, re-recorded, or there are different versions of them, but it does contain some songs that were released on singles prior to this, and that's, as far as I understand, pretty normal in the Japanese scene. But there's a song on here called something 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 in Japanese, but Alien, which starts out almost grindcore. Certainly starts out within, extreme metal, and then suddenly it morphs into a funk metal song, and you hardly notice, and then suddenly it's bubblegum pop, and again you hardly notice. And many of their songs, and listening to the entire album, is a musical journey. Again, just quickly, there you go, triggered. So those were the CDs. So let's turn to vinyl. First, I have kind of like a hybrid here. This is Enslaved's Axioma Ethica Odini, which is progressive black metal. This one looks like a 7-inch because it's really the CD, but it comes with a 7-inch. And it's black metal, but it takes black metal in a completely unexpected direction. Certainly if you are only kind of like used to the stereotypical early 90s raw black metal. This is actually very melodic. There's a lot of clean singing on it. There are lots of doom elements on it. You have every now and then some chords that are more like jazz, alternative chords on it, and jazz chords. I would say, for my money, this is a black metal masterpiece, to be honest. And I do have a preference for, when it comes to black metal, for the more progressive and avant-garde black metal. So this Enslaved album represents that interest in black metal. So let's turn to the 12 inches. The first one is this one here, Biscaya, self-titled. This is great. This is a traditional metal album, but there's much more to it. There are almost kind of like some proto-prog elements to it. There's a song called Fools. I could see it here on the actual track list on the inner label. Fools, which is kind of like progressive metal, and this is from '83 or something. You have some almost run-of-the-mill hard rock songs. You have some traditional metal songs, and then you have a really cool synth instrumental, which sounds like something out of a soundtrack from a movie. And that might not be a coincidence, because eventually their keyboard player, I think it is, landed a career as a composer in cinema and on TV shows. But this is a great, great album, a fantastic album, and certainly very innovative for a hard rock / metal album from the early 80s. The next one, I guess, kind of had to be on the list, Into the Pandemonium by Celtic Frost. This is where they went avant-garde. A very interesting listen. Has influences from all over the board, music-wise, but it still retains the dark sound, the core of Celtic Frost sound. A masterpiece again, I think. Another masterpiece for my money, although it's not my favorite album by this band, Death Human. Now I could have picked Scream Bloody Gore, because it's innovative in being one of the first real death metal albums. But I picked this one because this is the first album where Schuldiner takes death in a more technical and progressive direction. Here it's very well balanced between the brutal death metal sound, like in Suicide Machine. I just got to double check if it's on this album, but I think it is. Suicide Machine, flattening the emotions. Lot of good songs in this one. It still has one foot solidly placed in death metal, but it's progressive, it's technical, and I really enjoy listening to it. I remember many years ago I would this would be the only thing I actually listen to while bicycling to and from work for an entire month. So I obviously like this album, and I think it's very innovative for a death metal album. The next one is not people's favorite album by this band, Death Row Deception Ignored. This is technical thrash metal, and it's the compositions are challenging. The vocals are challenging too. Some people think they're weird. I don't have a problem with them, but they're challenging for sure because of the sound. I think this sort of quality of the voice of the vocalist, who's primarily not a trained singer, but it's technical thrash metal. The songs are very interesting. Very often when you think, okay, the song is about to end, because you look at the groove, it's almost running out, bang, a new section kicks in. There's a lot of that going on. There are lots of weird things going on in this album. So a great, for my money, technical thrash metal album. I also think this one is innovative, right? This, the Faith No More. I think their breakthrough album. It blends, heavy metal, hard rock. It has a really, really heavy sounding guitar tone. It has a funky bass. It has, like keyboards. And of course you have Mike Patton's silky, smooth voice all over the place. And he does a bit of rapping as well. So I would say this is certainly an innovative album, which I don't know if you could even say it was kind of like the birth of alternative metal, but it was one of the first alternative metal albums. And also, for my money, one of the best. The next one is another technical thrash metal album that I recently posted a video on. Hexenhaus, The Edge of Insanity. It's really interesting. It's technical thrash metal. It is up there in terms of, the tempos, but the songs are very, very complex. And the riffage is also complex and sometimes strange if you're just used to run-of-the-mill thrash metal. The vocals are a bit more on the hard rock side. And what I really find interesting about this is that there are a lot of sort of like Middle Eastern sounding scales that are being utilized on it. And it sounds very reminiscent of the Middle Eastern scales and harmonies that you hear on I think it's the first Memento Mori album. And that's because it's pretty much the same band without, I think, one or two members. But this is a great underrated technical thrash metal album with lots of cool things going on. This one is innovative. I don't care what people say. Iron Maiden, their debut album, it's innovative because, you had the new wave of British heavy metal. You had lots of really good bands, and you had more mediocre and not very good bands, but you had lots of really good bands. But most of them were kind of like, standard heavy metal, standard hard rock. But what Iron Maiden did was, and I think it's primarily because of Steve Harris's interest in metal and hard rock music on the one hand, and prog music on the other hand. They kind of combined those two. And I know it's like, people say they went prog on the X Factor and really after Bruce Dickinson returned. But already here, there are lots of progressive and really innovative things going on. You have Phantom of the Opera, which is an epic, although it's not as long as their subsequent epics, but it's an epic song, lots of different changes and moves going on. You have the anthem Iron Maiden, right? Their anthem. And if you think about it, it's really strange in the way that it's composed, very unconventional. And a lot of the songs on this album are unconventional. Now they sound conventional, but that's because this was the pioneer album. They set the rules. It's certainly set Iron Maiden apart from the rest of the new wave of British heavy metal. You did have some bands, I think, that were equally innovative, just never made it as big, like Hell, and I think Agony Bag were also associated with the new wave of British heavy metal, but this is the one that takes the cake, and this changed metal music forever. Iron Maiden's debut album. Another album that was so innovative that it flopped, Pestilence's Spheres. Another album that combines jazz and death metal. So we've had Atheist, we've had Cynic. Here's Pestilence Spheres. And what's really cool about that trio of albums is they sound completely different from one another. This one has a very dry sounding guitar tone, but I think that's on purpose. And they make use of very, very dissonant chords because they're jazz chords, but it still has the harsh death growls. And there are even some electronic elements on here every now and then. I think this is a great jazz metal album, but it was so mind-bending that people didn't get it and it flopped, and I think the band broke up after that. But I think it's a great, innovative album. And I think that Pestilence and Cynic, Atheist, and Death, without that, those 4 albums, I think death metal would have been very different. I don't think you would have had technical death metal as such. The last album I want to show is this one here, Master Project Genesis by Target. This is another technical thrash album with lots of really cool changes going on. Again, you know, slightly complex but never inaccessible songs. So they do a lot of innovative things on this album too. And I would say it's an underrated a technical thrash metal album. I hope more people would listen to it. There is a reissue on CD for sure. I don't know if I think there's a vinyl one too. This is an OG. So and the CD version because I have it on CD, that one combines this one, and doesn't combine them, but it contains this one and it contains the previous album, which sounds completely different. The previous album is just straight up standard thrash metal, but this is technical thrash metal, much better than the previous album. But those were the innovative albums that I listed. I have more albums in my collection that I think are innovative, but I've already gone on for a long time, and I listed quite a lot of them. But I hope that you found them, if you don't already know them, that you found them intriguing, that you are willing to giving some of these a spin. And again, congratulations to Stormwind79 for reaching the 200 sub benchmark or milestone. I think, not benchmark, milestone. Again, if you haven't checked out his channel, go and check it out. It's a great music themed, music media collection themed channel. Thanks for watching.